Hey everyone, this is Chris. Like I said, I'm going to try to get some more videos out dealing with our products and maybe some original content soon, but I want to give people a quick tour of Apex, which came out a few months ago. It's been successful, more successful than the 4th edition book, which was the original reason why I created Apex in the first place. It was meant to show what people can do with 4th edition rules. I think it proved it. It was quite popular. But oddly enough, 5th edition has been hugely successful, so I decided, what the hell, with excessive ultramodern, I wanted to dust off Apex and put it out and give people a superhero game. This is a small book, one of our smaller publications. It doesn't do much for including new mechanics. It does do one or two things. I'll do a quick tour so people can see where it's about. It is, once again, like Ultramodern, like Neurospastal, like Amethyst, completely compatible with traditional 5th edition mechanics. It doesn't break the system in such a way that it's incompatible with traditional 5th edition fantasy. So if you want to include these into your own basic dungeon romp, you theoretically can. You can combine this with Neurospastal and create a superhero cyberpunk story, which I've actually run. I've been thinking about doing that as an adventure, which combines Neurospastal and Apex into its own setting. That's a possibility. I ran it for a group and they really enjoyed it. But this is Apex. It has a very basic setting. It doesn't even have a module in it. It's very, very simplistic, 90 pages, so it's half the size of Ultramodern, half the size of Neurospasta. The whole mechanic in here is the fact that you basically create your class from the ground up. I didn't want to create a whole bunch of classes and people limited to that specific role. I wanted them to design their own superhero based on purchasing talents. And then these talents can then be boosted with these by basically putting points in to up the tier of that talent and make them more powerful. So you can be a really powerful flyer or be a really powerful kinetic, and at the cost of other abilities. You can pick superhero talents and be a traditional class, or you can pick a base universal class that is just based on getting you Apex abilities. These abilities can be easily broken. You can cheese this system. You can make the system very powerful. This is not a system that is meant to be 100% balanced. You'll have characters that will have super abilities that will be more powerful. There's just no way around that. But that's the way of the game. That's the same way when you read comic books. There are certain comic book heroes that are just more powerful than others. And it's up to the GM to tell a story that will hopefully make a lot of people useful. And I've been in games, superhero games, where there have been 3 or 4 other player characters that have been way more powerful than I have been. And, sometimes the GM works with it and goes with the flow, and sometimes it makes it not fun, but that's just the way of the game with superhero games. So the first thing you can do to give yourself a bit more of a boost is that you can actually screw yourself early on by giving you a penalty. And these will give you more Apex talents depending on how powerful it is. So you can be a paraplegic or have a deformity, and this will make you a bit more powerful. So you'll see these Apex talents. So you get 2 Apex talents and so forth. You gain 1 talent. And this allows you to kind of get to tweak your starting character's ability to be more powerful or less powerful depending on the sacrifices you take. And then we have backgrounds just like the backgrounds from 5th edition, except the fact you actually gain additional talents in a specific region. Now these talents are broken up. There's a Spectre talent. There's a Freak talent, there's Geiger, and we'll get into those in a second. And like Ultramodern, this is a variation on Tragedy and Windfall that adds in Apex stuff to it. And then we get to the ladders. Now the ladders are pulled from Ultramodern, except now they're ladders that are based on your abilities. So we have the Flux, which deals with time travel, Freak, which is mutations, Geiger, which deals with radiation and energy, Kinetic, which is a telekinetic. We have the Siphon, which deals with healing and damaging, Spectre, which deals with foretelling and precognition and so forth, String, which deals with puppeteering and hijacking people, Tinker, which deals with mechanical abilities. Now you don't have to take a ladder. You can actually pick a ladder from Ultramodern, and because if you picked a sacrifice, if you picked a background, you may already have 2 or 3 talents already going into this. So at character generation, you only get 1 talent, so you can still pick a regular ladder from Ultramodern and avoid, but then of course you'd miss out on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra talents. Plus, once again, because there's no magic items, we assume there's no magic items, you can get additional talents at 5th, 11th, and 17th level. This is once again in line, and if you're in a setting which has magic items, you can actually ignore this entry altogether. Then after the end, we get into classes, and you'll notice there's not much of a class here. In fact, this is the only class, right? Very little. And not even that, doesn't even have any abilities. It's a very neutral kind of placeholder for a class. And 1-8 level, very basic. You can cripple the class to give yourself more abilities. You get Apex talents right through here, and it tells you how to get more Apex talents. But once again, you're not bound to pick this class. You can pick a fighter from 5th edition Fantasy. You can pick a infiltrator from Ultramodern. You might already have Apex talents from the ladder, from the sacrifice, from your background. You don't necessarily have to pick these. So obviously, the more talents you acquire, the less functional you are as a character in regular life. If you pick the background, then you don't gain the regular background. If you gain a Apex ladder, you don't get the regular ladder abilities. If you pick this class, you get a lot of Apex talents, but nothing else. So you're not a very effective infiltrator or not a very effective fighter because all your abilities are based on your superpowers. By the way, I probably can't say the word superpower, but whatever, we'll see powers. And then here are the talents, and there's a lot of them. In fact, here's time travel talents just for Flux. That's all just one category. These are all the abilities. And then, as I stated about talents, every time you select a talent, that talent goes up a tier. So if you pick bullet time once, it's tier 1. Pick it again, it's tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and so forth. And then ones that start at tier 4 usually have a prerequisite. You actually have to hit one of these abilities up to tier 4 and then pick up this tier. And then they have the level requirements, I think, for those tiers as well. And so so you can't just come out the gate with the most powerful abilities. You can't freeze time until tier 6, for example. Although theoretically you probably could get it pretty early on, but this is obviously a very powerful ability. Most likely a starting character is going to have a tier from one of these ones. He's going to have a bullet time, combat teleport, prove reaction time jumper, long range teleport, orange, blue, or time lapse. He's going to have one or several of these abilities at first level. But if you're first level, you can actually go all the way to tier 4 just on bullet time if you sync all your talents into bullet time. So if you actually have sacrifice, you get one from there, from your ladder, from 2 from your chrysalis class, you can go all the way down to tier 4, which is actually quite powerful. Tier 4, you can choose to gain a standard action instead of a speed bonus when you use bullet time. Right? So you gain all of this plus all of these. You get all of these abilities if you go to tier 4 on bullet time. So once again, that's how the system works. And that's how all the system works. And some of them have more tiers than others. This one goes to tier 6, and that one's only to tier 3. You go look over here and you see an ability called Push. That's something you'll see very often. It allows you to make an Apex check where you make a mega skill check. And if you beat the DC, you can actually improve your ability temporarily. If you fail the check, you can get punished. Either you can get stunned or you can actually take damage. So be careful if you want to push or not. And some people can push more reliably than others. Jumper, which is time travel. Jumper is not time travel, but teleportation. And a lot of those. Freaks are basically physical mutations like spines or blades, bone shields, clay, their whole body makes choppers, his teeth. These are physical manifestations, so these definitely make you look very inhuman. Then we get into Giger talents, which is energy, which also includes being able to nullify other Apex abilities. And then we have kinetic, which is telekinetic, and we have a lot of that. Morph, which is a person that can change shape. So this is more about animal channeling and so forth. There's a lot of those. Phenom talents, which are basically more about taking a traditional ability and making it really powerful. It's really based around intelligence and wisdom, but it doesn't have to be. You can be really powerful. There's actually ones that boost up constitution, ones that boost up your dexterity, but these are the only superpowers or powers that can still kind of pass themselves off as normal people. This is still kind of in the range of science. And then we have Shaper, which is energy manipulation, so it can be dealing with altering water, kind of a bending ability, wink wink, nudge nudge. So those people who think you can do that, you can by using these abilities. And then we have Siphon talent, which is more about life energy, taking away life energy and adding in life energy, being able to damage people and heal them. And then we have Spectre, which is mostly about viewing other people, clairvoyance, claircognizance, and precognition. So being able to see the future, detect other people, and so forth. So you don't necessarily, it's actually nearly impossible to gain all the abilities at all the maximum levels most of the time, and some of these can even be contradictory. So you don't necessarily have to be a person that sees into the future. It may be just a person that can transplant their vision to another place on Earth, and you just develop those abilities only. You don't necessarily have to get all of these. In fact, you don't necessarily have to be forced into Spectre. You can get Spectre abilities and combine them with Morph abilities. These are string talents, for example. These are all basically manipulating people's minds or taking people over. And then Tinker, it's just mostly technical and mechanical abilities, hijacking electronics and robots and so forth. And there's a lot. You can see there's a lot. There's hundreds of combinations here. And then we get into antagonists and enemies, a very brief description of the setting. And going back to Ultramodern, we had those affiliations. So we have a few more adversary templates you can add to make superpower characters from the Ultramodern adversaries. And then a few additional monsters for good measure. But you can see the vast majority of the book is just these hundreds and hundreds of Apex abilities. I didn't want to expand the book too much. I didn't want to make it too heavy-handed and throw a lot of adventure stuff in there. I wanted to give people just the tools to create their own superpower system and go with it at that. The base setting was designed to be influenced by a film called Push, and originally that wasn't the intent. So the setting included is very much inspired by that movie. So its default setting is a low-level superpower setting. But you might not want to do that. You may want to go full-on, high-level comic books from the big brands, the big franchises, the big comic book franchise movies. And theoretically, you should be able to make most of them in here. A few, I don't know if you can make. I mean, you certainly can make the really supremely super powerful characters from the big comics. The ones that deal with possessing godlike abilities. Obviously, you'd have to make that character at a higher level, but that's, once again, within the system as well. So you can have characters at different levels if you think one character should be more powerful. So if characters start at 3rd or 4th level, then make one character 10th level. Now, is that balanced? No. So there are ways around that. For one thing, if you were to make a character that was 10th level and supremely powerful that way, you have a 10th level character with all of his abilities with the Apex talents, and then have a 10th level infiltrator with only a few Apex talents. So he's still equally trained, just not in the power ability. So power-wise, he's not very strong, but he's still strong in other ways. He's still a balanced character. He's still a 10th level infiltrator with only 2 or 3 abilities. So you can just have a character that just has ranks in Bone Shield, and he has, 10th level, at 10th level, he's got all 6 tiers of Bone Shield, and that's his only ability. But you don't need to be a Chrysalis with the sacrifice and all the ladders to do that. You only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 talents. You can get by that with the ladder and with your background. You can easily get 6 talents with that and have your class be a traditional class, like a martial artist. So you can have a martial artist with a Bone Shield, and then that's it. Or you can have a character who's, say, an infiltrator, and give him just abilities like Spastic Teleport. Actually, Spastic Teleport is a tier 3 ability, so you need something like Orange Blue, which is a tier 1 ability. And there you go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tier abilities can be boosted, but once again, you don't have to be a full-on character. Now, if you wanted to have all of the flux talents, every one of these as high as possible, then yes, you would have to go with the sacrifice, with the background, with the ladder, and then take the class and take the archetype and then get all your Apex abilities. But then you're doing nothing else. You are defined by your abilities and not defined by your class or even your backstory. That means your entire life has just been the developing of your abilities. But that's fine. That's the whole base of the system. You can invest how much time you want into these superpowers as you want, and then go on from there. So that's basically it. That's a quick little rundown. It's a small book. It's on sale. You can get it for, I think it's like only $5, so it's not even a big book. And it does require Ultramodern. It's compatible with that system. And technically it's compatible with the other systems we put out as well. So you can combine it with Neurospasta or anything else. All right, guys. Bye.